The American people are supposed to believe that Joe Biden never did anything to this employee, Tara Reade. Just take his word for it. He's Joe Biden, after all. Of course, by now, you know the story of E. Jean Carroll winning $83.3 million in that defamation lawsuit against Donald Trump. This is about a supposed sexual assault that happened, decades ago. And because President Trump denied it, well, she then triggered a defamation suit against him, and a jury just awarded her all that money, right? Those are the new rules that we're living under, right? This is the new standard in American politics. So I guess it seems fair that Joe Biden is now facing the exact same kind of lawsuit. Remember Tara Reade? Tara Reade used to work for Joe Biden back in the 90s, and she claimed during the 2020 presidential election that she was sexually assaulted by her boss, by Senator Joe Biden. Well, she is now suing for $10 million with the U.S. Department of Justice. She said that she had her privacy invaded, she had emotional distress, and a violation of her rights. She also accuses the FBI of conducting a secret operation called Operation Cassandra to stalk, discredit, intimidate, and potentially harm her to eliminate her as a threat to Joe Biden. Now, you might not remember this story in the 2020 campaign. It had a little bit of steam for a little while, but then the whole thing disappeared because Joe Biden sat down face to face with Mika Brzezinski, and he answered every question and denied the entire thing unequivocally. And then everybody in the media and everybody in politics was able to say, you see, he denied it unequivocally. He faced Mika Brzezinski, of all people, and answered every tough question, and now we can move on because it's over. That's how they treated it. I want to show you a little bit of that interview with Mika Brzezinski, and I want you to look at it right now, and you tell me if you think Joe Biden seems like an honest man with nothing to hide. It's just going to be a little bit of that interview, but I just want to remind you of what happened in this election. Watch.
The first is about your University of Delaware records. Do you agree with the reporting that those records were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were resealed for a longer period of time until after you leave, quote, public life? And if you agree with that, if that's what happened, why did that happen?
Because, look, the fact is that there's a lot of things of speeches I've made, positions I've taken, interviews that I did overseas with people, all of those things relating to my job. And the idea that they would all be made public in the fact while I was running for public office, they could be really taken out of context. The papers are position papers. They are documents that existed and that when I, for example, when I met with Putin or when I met with whomever, and all of that to be fodder in a campaign at this time, I don't know of anybody who's done anything like that. And so the National Archives is the only place there would be anything having to do with personnel records. There are no personnel records in the Biden papers at the university.
All right, so I'm going to pause here because this is really about Tara Reade, and we're going to continue. But just for a second there, the fact that this position was never challenged at the time, his personal papers from his entire career in the Senate and as vice president are kept at the University of Delaware, and it's all under lock and seal. And his argument that he just made there was, listen, I'm running for president. The last thing that I want is to anybody to look at the papers from my long political career because they might use it against me. And everyone was okay with that. I mean, think about that for a minute. God forbid anybody know what, I said to Putin when I met with them. I just want to be president now. That wouldn't be relevant to the campaign. And by the way, last I checked, every single one of Donald Trump's private personal papers, including his tax returns, have been illegally leaked to the press. And everyone celebrates that. But the key point here is documents pertaining to Tara Reade, the woman who is now accusing, or who was at that time and is still accusing Joe Biden of sexual misconduct. What Mika Brzezinski asks is, listen, why don't you open up those documents so we can see if there's anything there pertaining to Tara Reade? And Joe Biden is saying, well, no, because there are no personnel records there. And we're just supposed to take his word for it, right? Well, now watch how this interview goes.
So personnel records aside, are you certain there was nothing about Tara Reade in those records? And if so,
I am absolutely certain.
Why not approve a search of her name in those records?
approve a search of her name.
Yes, and reveal anything that might be related to Tara Reade in the University of Delaware records.
There is nothing. They wouldn't. They're not there. And if it's, I don't understand the point you're trying to make.
The point I'm trying to make is
personnel
that
records
you
by
are,
definition.
The point I'm trying to make is that you are approving and actually calling for a search of the National Archives records of anything pertaining to Tara Reade. I'm asking why not do the same in the University of Delaware records, which have raised questions because they were supposed to be revealed to the public and then they were sealed for a longer period of time. Why not do it for both sets of records?
Because the material in the University of Delaware has no personnel files, but it does have a lot of confidential conversations that I had with the president about a particular issue, that I had with the heads of state of other places, that would not be something that would be revealed while I was in public office or while I was seeking public office. It just stands to reason. To the best of my knowledge, no one else has done that either.
I'm just talking about her name, not anybody else in those records. A search for that. Nothing classified with the president or anybody else. I'm just asking, why not do a search for Tara Reade's name in the University of Delaware records?
Look, I mean, who does that search?
The University of Delaware. Perhaps you set up a commission that can do it. I don't know. Whatever is the fairest way to create the most transparency.
Well, look, Mika, she said she filed a report. She has her employment records still. She said she refiled a report with the only office that would have a report in the United States Senate at the time. If the report was ever filed, it was filed there, period.
Now, you saw his performance there. Do you think he seems like someone who's telling the truth? Do you think he seems like someone who has nothing to hide? And he still never actually gave a legitimate answer. If there's no records pertaining to Tara Reade, then why not authorize a simple search of the name Tara Reade? And of course, that never happened. Also, did you notice a lot of delay going on there with the questions and answers? Is it me, or do you think maybe somebody was feeding him answers in his ear? I know that there's one point where it looks like he reaches down and gets a piece of paper that somebody hands him. Did you see that right at the end? Here, watch this.
Set up a commission that can do it. I don't know. Whatever is the fairest way to create the most transparency.
See that? See that? Somebody handed it. You can even hear the paper. Boy, did we really get taken for a ride in 2020. But listen, the American people are supposed to believe that Joe Biden never did anything to this employee, Tara Reade. Just take his word for it. He's Joe Biden, after all. Take his word as a Biden, right? And besides, there's no kind of past kind of behavior that he's ever been accused of, right? There's no pattern of behavior that this fits into, that Joe Biden, I'm sure, has nothing to worry about with this new defamation lawsuit, except for the fact that Lucy Flores might be brought in as a witness. You remember her? She talked about the awkward kiss that he gave her, changed how she saw Joe Biden. She was a Democrat supporter, Lucy Flores was. She wrote that in March of 2019. Or maybe she might have to answer to Amy Lapos. Amy Lapos is the Connecticut woman who says Joe Biden touched her inappropriately at a 2009 fundraiser. She talked about that in April of 2019. Of course, he might also have to confront the issue of Caitlin Caruso. She calls herself a sexual assault survivor and said that Joe Biden touched her uncomfortably. This was in April of 2019 also. Of course, if he can answer to all three of those people, then he might then finally have to deal with the accusations of DJ Hill, who also accused Joe Biden of sexual misconduct. This also in April of 2019. Boy, there sure were a lot of stories about Joe Biden and sexual inappropriate behavior back there in 2019, and it all sort of disappeared when he got the nomination for president. By the way, all of this inappropriate behavior from Joe Biden with Tara Reade and some of these other allegations, it all happened in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, back when another very famous Democrat who ended up being president of the United States was also acting in a very similar way. That was Bill Clinton, who, just like Joe Biden, denied all this stuff left and right until, Monica Lewinsky had a little bit of evidence that suggested that maybe it really did happen. Bill Clinton at the time hired someone to clean up that whole mess, politically speaking, of course. His name was John Podesta. John Podesta. John Podesta is in the news again this week. Joe Biden just hired him to replace John Kerry as the new climate czar. It's amazing how when the news cycle happens to move this way, John Podesta just shows up. Isn't it amazing?